All right, we're good?
It says green.
We are good. All right, good. All right, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Tom Barba. I'm a chiropractic physician, been practicing since 1989. We do mainly nutritional work as well as chiropractic services. Today we're going to basically be covering liver issues and metabolic disorders. So if anybody has any questions as I'm rolling along, you're welcome to always ask, and we'll kind of take it from there. I've been doing something called nutrition response testing since 2009, and I was also doing a lot of nutritional work back in the 1990s. It's very similar to the techniques we're using today. So got about 30-something years of experience on it at this point, and we really help with a lot of different conditions. But today we're going to talk about liver function and metabolic disease itself and how the liver is actually involved in that. And I am going to be looking at notes every now and then, so bear with me, and we'll go ahead and get started on this. Okay? All right, so what does the liver do? So the liver, most of us think, is a detoxifying organ, meaning like if you get something toxic in your body, your liver is there to cleanse it. That's more or less what most people think the liver's total function is. The liver is the largest organ in the body. It's over 3 pounds. It's also one of the few organs that can regenerate itself fully. So if you have liver damage, say there was an injury to your liver, which can happen a lot of variety of different ways, like car accident or something like that, the liver itself will actually repair itself, and it repairs itself relatively quickly. In fact, if you do the right things for the liver, you can actually see a positive change within a few weeks. It's not something that could take months or years to fix, although sometimes, depending on the condition, it can. But for the most part, you'll actually see a positive response within a few weeks. It doesn't have to take a long time. So a couple things the liver does. One of them is bile production. Now bile, I don't know how many of you guys know about bile or what bile actually does, but bile actually helps to break down fat in the intestinal system so that your body can then absorb it. It also transports toxins into the gut and helps convert vitamin D into its active form. So if you're coming up with low D in your blood, it's a possibility it could be a liver dysfunction, that you might be getting enough D, but there's something not working correctly in the liver. So that's a big production. That's a big portion of what the liver does, at least on digestion. It also stores glucose in the form of glycogen. It converts fat to energy and breaks down proteins to amino acids. So what does all that mean? Well, it stores sugar that you consume so that that sugar can then be turned into something your body can then use for energy. We're going to cover a little bit more detail on that a little bit later, but we're just giving you just the basic facts of this. Converts fat to energy, obviously. Now, if you're losing weight, you think, wow, I'm losing weight, the body's using it up, the muscle tissue using it up. No, it all actually has to go through the liver first before your body can then start breaking the fat down so that you can start losing weight and doing all of those fun things. So breaks down proteins to amino acids. So it takes the bigger protein chunks, breaks each of those pieces off, makes the amino acids that your body can then use in different parts, different functions of your body, and that helps with that. It also makes cholesterol. Believe it or not, your body produces most of the cholesterol that you see on your blood tests. Very little cholesterol you get from your diet, believe it or not. So I know there's a lot of questions about cholesterol. I do an entire lecture on cholesterol, so when I do that, you're welcome to come back for that one. And if I ever upload the video I did on cholesterol some time ago, you can sit and watch that too. But I go over a little bit more about what cholesterol is. But the liver itself produces cholesterol. Now, cholesterol is great for your organs, for everything, really. All your cell tissues have cholesterol. In fact, your cellular membranes are made of cholesterol, and your brain is 70% cholesterol. At least the myelin sheets, or the things that hold the tissues in, are basically cholesterol. It also makes coagulation factors, which is something that helps coagulate blood. Let's see if I want to go over any more of this. It also converts thyroid hormone into an active form of that hormone as well. It also makes insulin growth factor, which produces cellular growth, which helps to produce cellular growth. So it also manages insulin. Storage facility for vitamin A, B12, D, E, K, iron, and copper. So there's a lot your liver does. It's not just, it's a detoxing organ. It is a very functional organ. So, go back to my other notes. So currently, fatty liver disease, which we're going to be talking about. I'm also going to kind of cover a little bit about metabolic disorder as well, which is going to cover some diabetes aspects as well as sugar addiction. We're going to cover a lot of that. So a couple things you want to know about liver dysfunction is about 100 million people in the United States actually today have what we call it may not be non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, but fatty liver disease. We'll just classify it as that right now. So now I know most of you don't drink, right? Alcohol, right? Yeah. So even without alcohol, your body can actually have a fatty liver. Do you know that? Yeah. Okay. So one of the things with that is how does that occur? There are two different molecules your body deals with when you're eating. One of them is glucose, the other is fructose. Every cell uses it. Every cell uses glucose. So you think sugar is bad. In a sense, it is. But we're going to cover a little more of why that is the case. But fructose is really the main problem that we're dealing with. If you go back, I don't know, you were around in the 1970s. Yeah. And if you remember back in the 1970s, how many people were really overweight? Friends, family?
Not as many.
Not many. Not a lot of people. You weren't running around going. You know, it's really interesting. I was watching, Carol O'Connor from All in the Family. And we used to think that back in seriously, I remember this in the 70s when I was a kid, that Carol O'Connor was really obese. That's what we thought. He was obese, right? This obese guy sitting on his couch or his chair and complaining about the world, right? That was All in the Family. And, you know, and it just reminds me because he passed away recently and I saw a picture of him and I'm thinking to myself, going, yeah, that was classified as obese back then. At least, definitely more than just overweight. He was more than just overweight, right? But if you look at those pictures today, what do you see? You see a guy who's got a few extra pounds. Doesn't look obese to me anymore. That's how much it's changed. That's how much the viewpoint's changed. So fructose has been added into our diet. Like in the particularly 1980s, 1990s, they started adding a lot more of it into our diet. So instead of when you would eat a candy bar, like a Three Musketeers bar or Hershey's bar or something like that, those Hershey's bars used to have sugar, right? Body response to sugar can more or less deal with sugar, more or less. I can't say it's a really smart thing to do anyway, but it can kind of deal with that. Fructose, it has a really hard time dealing with. The liver has a hard time breaking fructose down. Now, what is fructose? That's sugar from, believe it or not, fruits and vegetables, particularly corn syrup. When you see high fructose corn syrup, it is high fructose corn syrup. I mean, I don't know how else to put those words. It's very high in sugar. The liver itself has trouble dealing with it. So if the liver can't deal with it, what does it do? It lays it down as extra calories or extra sugar, and it becomes fat. So since they started adding that into the diet, you started seeing people getting a little chubbier and a little chubbier and a little chubbier. Then about the mid-1990s, they started with chemical well, there's always been chemical added to the foods, but it's now much more chemicalized than it's ever been before. And that really started in the, again, late 80s, early 90s. And you would see foods that normally would have 4 or 5 ingredients and now have 20 or 30 ingredients, even though it's supposedly the same food. Like I saw a picture of Cheez-Its. I think it was Cheez-Its anyway, but it had like, you know, half a dozen ingredients to Cheez-Its back in the 70s, and now it's got like 40 different ingredients, something crazy. I don't know if those are the exact numbers, but yeah, it's kind of nuts. It's really kind of nuts. So on top, so again, you add chemicals now, and the liver has to detox those chemicals as well. So not only are you dealing with the high fructose corn syrups and the dextrin and the maltodextrin and all of these different names for the same basic thing, you're adding chemical pressure on the liver as well. So now the liver is really starting to struggle, and it's really starting to fight. And what it does is it continues to lay down more fat. One of the things I don't think people realize is that in your fat tissue itself has every chemical, every drug, everything you've ever consumed in it. Ever. Everything. Your body will lay down fat to detoxify the blood. Liver does that. Okay?
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's not particularly well known, but the study was done back in the 1950s, and they actually saw that that was the case. You could take somebody's fat tissue, and you can see just about everything they've been exposed to: lead, arsenic, titanium, all the metals, any drug that they've taken, street drug, whatever. In fact, we used to call, again, we're talking early on, somebody did LSD, for instance, they would have a flashback, meaning they would get the same symptoms of the LSD as when they originally took it. So if you had a flashback, that was an indication that the LSD was released back into your bloodstream. Where was it stored? In the fat tissue.
Wow.
Yeah, so you burned up that fat tissue, LSD. Start getting high again. Didn't happen often, but it did happen. It was one of those, people used to talk about it all the time. Remember that when I was a kid. Never did LSD, never will. So the liver gets overloaded with these things. Now, where do we get most of the high fructose corn syrup? Or where do we get fructose from? Well, we do get it from fruit. Now, because of the enzymatic aspects of fruit, so if you were to eat an orange or an apple or something like that, there's enzymes in those fruits that help to break down the fructose to some degree, so it's a little bit easier on the liver. But most of it now is you're getting it out of processed foods, soda, fruit juices, because they're really high sugar content and they're just straight sugar. It's basically sugar and water with flavoring is really what it is now. Desserts and even hidden sugars. In fact, the average American eats, and this particular number came from about 10 or 15 years ago, so I'm pretty sure it's higher now than it was then. But the average American eats 150 pounds of sugar a year. Okay, so that's basically more or less about a half a pound of sugar a day. Okay, if you think about the numbers, 150 pounds of sugar a year. Now that sugar is from your breads, your cereals, your fruit, some vegetables that are high, like corn and carrots, peas, things like that are high in sugar. It comes from your sodas, comes from adding sugar to your coffee or tea. So you add all of that together, you get about 150 pounds. Potatoes are high in sugar, starches, ice cream, sweet potatoes are high. So those are some of the things that happen, right? So what happens then is, so now your liver is actually struggling. So you're having trouble breaking down the fats, you're having trouble breaking down the sugars, you're having trouble now detoxifying the organ, and the body explodes. You have what we classify as an inflammatory reaction, and then you wonder why you have autoimmune system issues on top of that, because now the body starts attacking itself, and that's what you see. So how does this lead in? So this is this particular problem is what we call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and over 100 million Americans have that disease, whether they know it or not. Doesn't necessarily produce symptoms until maybe it's too late, but you will notice symptoms because your sugar levels will start going up because it actually affects your insulin. Now remember, we talked a little bit about insulin growth factor there. So if that's not being produced or being overproduced, your insulin goes up because the body's trying to push the sugar out of your bloodstream into the tissues. And after a period of time, the body starts to ignore the insulin and doesn't absorb the sugar. Okay? You have what we classify then as insulin resistance. So that's what now is quoted as insulin resistance. So you classify that maybe as pre-diabetes, meaning you let that go on long enough, you're going to become diabetic. There was a study done recently that said there would be 50%, I believe, more people who have diabetes by 2050 than they do now.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you know that that's the case, and you know that that's going to occur, and you're seeing the numbers go up like that, wouldn't you think you want to do something to stop it or slow it up or say, hey, maybe we're doing something wrong right now and we should kind of not do this anymore? But there is so much money in diabetes. There is so much money in fat and sick people. There is so much money in cancer. Because obviously, if you lead to an inflammatory condition long enough, then the DNA of the particular cells start to break their chains, and you start to get these weird growths, which is what we call cancer. So your liver's sick, can't produce right, can't detoxify, can't digest the sugars, can't break down the fat, cholesterol goes up, sugar goes up, triglycerides go up, and insulin resistance increases. So you're seeing higher insulin rates with your sugar levels going higher. And then the next thing you know, you have diabetes. And then you have all these other debilitating conditions that come along with that. So we classify that as metabolic disorder. That's at least what the current term is. It's metabolic disorder, which is basically high blood pressure also occurs because if you're backing up the liver, it adds pressure, back pressure, which we classify as high blood pressure. You leave that long enough, you start getting kidney disease, which diabetes does that as well. And high sugar content in your blood adds to that. So then you run into diabetes, your kidneys stop functioning, you start running into renal issues, it starts showing up in your urine. That's usually about the time they catch it. Usually about then, you're pretty far gone. You know, when you hit about that point, right? Your body's like, I can't deal with this anymore. And starts breaking down proteins incorrectly, it comes out the urine, and you see it. You see it on a test. So that's after your blood sugar's been high a little while, and I don't know how many. Are you guys on any diabetic meds, or anybody have diabetes here?
No, it's in my family though, so I'm kind of leery and watching.
Yeah, so you have it in your family.
Two brothers have it.
Yeah, and right. Oh. I don't know how much of it's genetically, like there's a genetic aspect, or it's a dietary aspect that your family's always had.
Probably both.
Meaning like your family always had ice cream every night after dinner, or pie after dinner, right? Because that used to be the thing. I remember this as a kid, man. My mom, you'd be done with dinner, it'd be 8 o'clock, and you got to have a snack, cookie, ice cream. Now my mom's 94. I watch her diet. I'm like, how did you make it to 94? I mean, talk about good genes, man. Jeez.
They worked hard back then.
They worked hard, but they didn't grow up on high fructose corn syrup.
Exactly.
They didn't grow up on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So back then, ice cream actually was ice cream. It had sugar.
Yes.
I was, it's funny because I was over there and I'm like, I rarely have ice cream. I'm like, I'll have some ice cream, because they still eat ice cream, right? And I'm like, I'll try some. And I looked at it and it said, frozen dairy dessert.
Oh, yeah.
I went, frozen dairy dessert. It's not ice cream anymore. It's something else. So to get real ice cream, like real ice cream, you have to, I don't know, I guess you probably either have to make it yourself or I think Haagen-Dazs is pretty close to real ice cream. I think they have eggs in it and some other good things, but still, it's like, I don't know. It's kind of crazy. So metabolic disease, I don't know. Do you guys want me to cover more on that, or that gives you some idea of what it is? So you have fatty liver disease. We're talking mainly about the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. We're talking about, what happens to the liver itself. So the liver actually has an inflammatory response, and it begins to get inflamed, and you also have an autoimmune system issue too, usually about that point where the body starts to kind of kill its own cells off. That leads to scarring of the liver, which we call fibrosis of the liver, and if that gets bad enough, you have cirrhosis of the liver. Okay, and that's heavy scarring of the liver. You get into cirrhosis, then you have a real issue. Now that can occur with or without alcohol. People are always thinking, well, I had to be drinking massive amounts of alcohol to get cirrhosis of the liver. People drank alcohol, and alcohol, guess what?
Sugar.
It's sugar. So it's just a different form of sugar. Okay? And the problem is, when a person really is an alcoholic, they're drinking not just one beer, they're drinking 6, 12, 18 beers a day. That's a lot of sugar. That's a lot of sugar to consume, and that's why their livers usually break down maybe faster than somebody who just eats a candy bar every day or ice cream every day, right? So when the liver is clogged with fat and toxins and hormones don't clear properly, metabolism slows, cholesterol level rises, and that's why I said maybe people think they have a cholesterol issue. When I cover cholesterol in my cholesterol workshop, particularly, I don't really, when I look at those numbers on blood tests just as a doctor, I almost could care less what the cholesterol number is. If it's high, I look for very specific indicators to see if they have something like metabolic disorder. And if they do, now what am I looking for? I probably should tell you what I'm looking for, right? When I look at somebody's blood tests, I look at the top number. How much cholesterol do they have? I'm not so concerned about the HDL and LDL levels, which are high-density lipoproteins and low-density lipoproteins. High density is supposedly the good one. High density is just repair. Low density is for the repair. High density takes it off the shelves. I'm like going, oh my God, I'm going blank on that right now. But either way, they're for repair and recovery, meaning one uses to repair the arterial tissues or the tissues of the body. The other one helps to break down what is excessive for that repair. Best way to put that, okay? I don't really worry about that too much. What I look at are triglycerides. Now, triglycerides are also fatty acids, and they tell me whether or not the liver is functioning correctly and how their fat metabolism actually is. Are they breaking down the lipids in their liver? If they're not, their triglycerides start to really skyrocket. I saw one guy, his triglycerides were over 400. It should be below 100. And he was sitting at 400. I'm like, oh my God. And so we had to actually deal with that particular problem. The other thing I look at is the glucose numbers. Now you want to be below 100. You really want to be, honestly, below 95, if you ask me, or like in the 70, 80 range. It's really when you want to be sitting glucose numbers-wise. Reason being, again, if that's high, you have an issue, right? So if triglycerides are high, glucose is high, and I always do an insulin test. I always look at particularly a fasting insulin test, because that tells me whether or not they're insulin resistant or not. If that's high, sugar's high, triglycerides are high, we know they're insulin resistant. Even though they might not be out of the range yet of, like into the range of diabetes, if those are high, I have a problem with that patient, right? That patient has a problem and they're moving into diabetes. I let that go for 4 or 5 years. They're full-blown type 2 diabetes. And that's what happens. I might not, I'll literally start to work with a person, then they disappear. for a while, and then they come back, oh, I'm type 2 diabetes. Yeah, your blood showed it here that you were starting into that, and now you are there, right? So you want to stop it well before it gets to that point. So you start seeing those numbers go up, you got an issue. So I'm going to give you a personal thing, just because I feel like it today. I was actually, I guess really about this time last year, I had some blood tests done, just to kind of see where, well, even, I don't know, I've been trying to do one about every 6 months, just to kind of see what's happening in my body and stuff like that. I don't necessarily go by everything I do by the blood test, but the blood test give me an indicator whether or not I'm doing better, worse, or the same. It just shows me that, right? So in November of 24, I did a blood test. And I actually have these blood tests on a video. I actually did upload that video. And you can see it at Rose Chiropractic PC YouTube channel. Okay? It's also, I think, on our Facebook page as well. And I actually I actually go through I don't know, maybe the last 4 or 5 times I've taken blood, just to kind of see and like what I've done in between, like what types of diet I was doing to show those differences, right? Because I figure if it works on me, it's going to work on somebody else, because my body is extremely resistant to anything. Extremely resistant. And just even me to try to lose 5 pounds is a nightmare. And I do not have a fatty liver, and I do not have a metabolism issue anymore. And the body just holds it. And I work out 4 days a week, 2.5 hours each day, 4 days a week. And my body just would not lose weight. It would not drop the poundage. It would not drop the fat, right? So I said, okay, this is getting ridiculous, because, knowing everything I know as a nutritionist, knowing everything I've studied, knowing every single patient I would set up and put on very specific diets would have a tendency to lose 3 to 5 pounds in the first week, and then continue to lose 1 to 2 pounds a week after that consistently, until they got down to whatever body weight they wanted to get down to and were relatively stabilized, right? I mean, that's what we see. And I mean, you've been on a program how long?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. And how much weight you lost? 12 pounds in 3 weeks. That's 4 weeks.
It's not bad.
No, that's excellent. That's superior, right? That's excellent. Okay. So anyway, so I started really looking at my blood tests, and cholesterol was high. It's been high since I can remember. HDL, LDL levels were okay. Triglycerides, I think the first one was slightly above normal. I think it was 140 or 150. You'd have to watch the video. I don't actually remember the exact numbers. And I have it on my phone, which I'm actually recording on, so I can't really pull that up and show you. Okay, so that was in November, and then at that point, I think around February of last year, I decided to do something a little bit more extreme. Now, one of the key things on how you handle metabolic disorders is you stop eating. Now, that sounds a little ridiculous, because, well, if you stop eating, then you have no calories, and you're going to get tired, and you're going to have all these horrible things happen to you, right? Now, what I mean by not eating is, a lot of people will call it intermittent fasting, meaning they would only eat during a certain window of the day, so it allows their body long enough for the liver and the intestinal system to get a rest. Now, one of the things you have to understand in America, we are lucky. We have food. Even if you're the poorest of the poor, you have access to food. Right?
Yeah.
You have some some way of getting food, whether it's through SNAP programs, or I think it's SNAP, right? That's what it's called.
SNAP.
SNAP programs,
Family,
friend, whatever.
Food
Food banks. There's tons of food banks you can go to get food. We have access to food. We have such a huge abundance of food that we think we should eat that food all the time. And I'm like, I get it. I grew up like this. We had 3 meals a day. Then you had a snack at sometime midday or mid-morning. Then you'd have a snack midday, and you'd have a snack at night. That's what we grew up with. That's eating 6 times a day. And then if you got bored, you went over to the refrigerator and ate some more in between. Not because you were hungry, because you were bored, right? You have these other things going on.
Watching
This
TV.
is,
Yes.
huh?
Watching TV.
Watching TV.
Oh, yeah.
And God, look at the number of food commercials on TV. Come to Burger King, whatever. All these wonderful places to eat that, maybe not so wonderful, you think, right? So this is what we grew up with. Okay. If you go back to when bodies were designed, which, we figure is the last, I don't know. I think human civilization or human body supposedly started about 200,000 years ago. At least that's what some of the records show. There was actually some data on that. That's scientific data as well as religious data as well as some old text data that all puts it down to around 200,000 years ago. You had the whole Adam and Eve theory or religious aspect where Adam and Eve had the first children and society hence started after that, right? There might be more truth in it than not. Because we actually do go down to a very specific genetic blockage around that time period, around 200,000 years ago, where our mitochondrial DNA from women specifically, because the mitochondrial DNA, which are the little engines in the cells, those mitochondria have their own genetic codes. They took that genetic code and it only goes from the female, meaning the male never goes to the next generation. Okay? So it's only female related. So they took that back and it went back about 200,000 years ago. So you take that viewpoint and say, okay, good. Let's just say we're around 200,000 years. Bible says 5,000. Sumerian texts say 400,000. Whatever the number is. Doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter. We've been around a long time. Have we ever had a society like this before? No. We've not had a society where we've added massive chemicals into our foods. We haven't had a society where we were doing better living through chemistry, which started in the 30s and 40s, to store food for extended periods of time. Usually we went out and hunted it or gathered it. Now, if I don't know if any of you guys ever hunt? No?
Yep.
You did? Yeah. Hunting is not as easy as it seems.
Nope.
Right? You'd be sitting out in the woods for hours and not see even a squirrel. Right? They smell you. They know you're there. They don't want to come near you. And you might be sitting there for hours. You might be sitting there for a day. You might be sitting there for 2 days. Maybe 3, and finally a deer comes across your path, right? Or a buffalo or whatever. And you get your little spear and your little arrow and you shoot the deer or throw the spear at the deer and you miss. Now you got to wait another maybe day, 2, 3 days before you get a meal. Now what are you living on at that point?
Water.
You're living on probably water. You're lucky if it's a time of year, like during the spring and summer and fall, where you got a chance to get some nuts and fruit and things like that, but you're not eating a lot of that. You're just eating enough for you to survive. So you might not eat for 2-3 days, a week. Okay, so I started looking into this and I said, people talk a lot about intermittent fasting, and that's one of the benefits of intermittent fasting is it helps to break down these excess sugars, this excess fat in your body. That's what intermittent fasting supposedly helps you do. All right. But it's still not the way we used to eat. So this time last year, I said, you know what? We're going to do the craziest diet that anybody's ever done. And I just want to see what kind of response my body gets. Because I had done a ketogenic diet. Now, ketogenic is usually what I put my patients on. So we're dealing mainly with proteins and vegetables and keeping the sugar levels in those particular things as low as possible. If somebody's really got a metabolic disorder, I try to get them down below 25 grams of sugar. I try to. It's very difficult to do. 25 grams is not a lot. Most people eat 300 to 400 grams of sugar a day. Just normally eat that much. And that's even on a pretty decent diet. A lot of people eat a lot more than that. You know, one Coke is probably that many, you know, because they say servings and there's 25 servings in a Coke bottle, you know, one of those kind of things. So, so I said, okay, well, what did we used to do and what did we used to eat? So I sat back and really started just really thinking about this and going, okay, I'm going to try this myself before I actually mention this to any patient, because any patient will honestly think I'm a lunatic at this point for pushing my body through something like this. And I had, like I said, I had done keto probably since the late 90s. I would say I started that. Like 98, 99, I was very consistent on a ketogenic diet because we were talking about this stuff in the 90s. The stuff that like Dr. Gundry talks about. I try not to watch the videos, but occasionally they pop up on my line. I'm like, yeah, we've been saying that for 30 years, 35 years. We've been saying the exact same thing for 35 years. So it's over half my life I've been talking about that. Almost the entire time I've been in practice, we've been talking about these things. And but still, it wasn't handling all the health issues that, one, I had and as well as other people had. So I said, okay. So in November, I was on ketogenic, hit it in February, March. April, I started doing something really, basically February of last year, I said, okay, we're going to try something really wild. And we're going to eat for 2 days or 3 days. We're going to do intermittent fasting during that time, meaning I'm only having 1 to 2 meals a day. Okay? On the third day or fourth day, I'm not going to eat at all. So I'm going to do 3 days of intermittent fasting, 1 day of pure fasting. Then 2 days of intermittent fasting, 1 day of fasting. So it gives my body a heavy break. Because like I said, back then, we weren't eating every day. We just didn't eat every day. Okay. So we all, I don't know, if you watched any videos, Dr. Berg does really good work with that. So I would suggest always watching his stuff. He's very good. And he talks a lot about intermittent fasting and how it actually helps to break down the chemicals and the cell tissue that isn't functioning correctly, and the body kind of chews that up and breaks it down so your body gets healthier and healthier as you're doing that. So I did that for, I don't know, maybe the first month and a half of this. So about 6 weeks in, maybe 8 weeks in on this particular diet. And I started noticing that I didn't want to eat anymore. I got to a point where I was like, the body just doesn't want to eat, stop eating. Meaning like, wasn't hungry. So I started going into that, a second day of not eating. So I'd eat 3 days, not eat for 2 days. Okay? Then eat maybe 2 or 3 days, and then not eat for another day or two, depending on how I was doing. So that now I'm up to basically 3 days a week of not eating. By about mid to late April, I think I was at that stage. Okay? During that time period, I lost an average of 2 to 3 pounds a week of fat. Okay? So I kept that in. And what I was noticing, particularly on the days that I didn't eat, that I was mentally sharper, I physically felt better, and I could do a lot more than the days I was eating. And I thought, oh my God, how much energy is my body using just to digest the food that I'm eating? I haven't even told you what I was eating during this time yet. And I'm going to let you know what that is too, because it's very specific. And I said, that's really interesting. And then I pushed it a little more. Went to 4 days of not eating a week. So I'd eat Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The rest of the week I wasn't eating. Deb knows because she watched me go through this last year. I was grumpy here and there, but for the be quite honest with you, days I was grumpy were the days that I actually was eating, not the days I wasn't eating. And I said, well, that's interesting. So you can go up to 4 days without eating and not have any physiological problems and actually feel okay.
Yep.
So then I said, okay, well, what else can we do with this? I started increasing how much I was working out, not eating 3 to 4 days a week. And I quadrupled the amount of working out I had done, because back then I was doing 30 minutes on a bike and about 20 minutes of weightlifting. Now I I still really don't do that much weightlifting. I do about 25 because I have a back issue, so I don't want to get into that. That was actually one of the reasons I was doing this, is an anti-inflammatory aspect, right? Oh, so blood tests. I was actually talking about the blood test too. So there was another test you actually should run, and it's something called C-reactive protein, which tells you how inflamed your body is. Like if you have rheumatoid arthritis or something like that, you can actually see that in those blood tests, right? So I said, okay, I got to get the inflammation down or I'm going to die, literally. I was in pain constantly, and I honestly felt like there was times where I'm like, this body's done. And if I go over my whole history, you'd understand what that actually was, but I'm not going to do that here. So C-reactive protein was close to 10, which is super high, back in November of 24. Did it later on after I was on my crazy diet, and I still haven't told you what I ate on this diet, but I will. Dropped down to, I think, 4 or 5, and then the last one I did, which was in October of last year, so 25, it was down below, it was, I think, 2.3, which was in normal range.
Wow.
C-reactive protein just dropped. Also, my insulin levels, I think they were around 9 or 10, dropped to like 1 or 2, which means my body literally is not producing insulin anymore. It doesn't need to. There's no stress. The body's completely not in any stress anymore. Now, you would honestly think what I just said to you about not eating for 3 or 4 days a week, right? Working out, working a job, a lot of stress at the job in a sense. You're dealing with people. There's stress associated with that. There's the mental, and then there's the physical stress of being a chiropractor and adjusting people. You would think that those numbers should not change or go up. It should show that my body is under a hell of a lot more stress than it was before. Yet it's the complete opposite. I said, maybe I'm onto something here. So, no patient has done this yet. I can't even get patients to do intermittent fasting for the most part, which I think would at least be a good start in the right direction on this. And the metabolic disorder that you have can be handled, is really kind of what I'm getting at. Now, what did I eat do you want to know what I was eating?
Oh, yeah.
You sure you really want to know?
Hot dogs. No.
Yeah? No, I wasn't eating hot dogs. But when I sat down originally when I thought about this, I said, what's the most nutrient-dense food you have that you could possibly eat? What's the most nutrient-dense food you can eat? Meaning it has all the nutrients, all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the fats, all the amino acids,
Eggs?
all of it. Eggs are one.
Okay.
What else?
Apple?
No.
No, because that would be sugar.
You're on the right path with eggs. What else is in that category?
Chicken? No.
No. Chicken will not do it. Eggs, what's really interesting is eggs actually have all the amino acids you need.
Yes, I knew that.
Yeah, but chickens don't. I always thought that's like, that's interesting. I wonder what happens, right? Same with fish. Fish don't. The only thing that has that is red meat.
I was just going to say red meat would be the next, yeah.
Red meat is the only thing, not even pork.
See, a lot of people won't do
Actually,
that.
I shouldn't say it. Pork does. But red meat specifically has all the nutrients your body needs to function correctly. It is the most nutrient-dense food. And what are they telling you about red meat? Don't eat red meat. It is bad for you. You should only have it once a month or once a week or whatever is recommended.
In very small doses.
Okay, so I said, good. Whatever, I'm either going to kill the body at this point right? Or I'm going to fix it. There's either one or the other is going to occur. I've had enough. So what did I do? Red meat. Nothing else. I wasn't even in eggs at the time, which I might go back on it again. Red meat and salt, specifically salt, because what happens, you really don't get enough electrolytes in the meat itself, so you actually have to add salt. But sea salt works great. You don't really need to add much other minerals or whatever to that. Handled any spasms I was having. Also, if the days that I was off, where I wasn't eating and I got a bit hungry or I got a little bit lightheaded, it was a mineral deficiency, I just ate salt and just had salt and water. Oh, and I wasn't drinking anything but water. So it was literally red meat, salt, water diet. I did take some supplements just to make sure I wasn't missing like D and a couple other things that I did, which if anybody really wants to know, I could recommend what I was actually taking on top of it. And I was also taking some stem cell extracts just to make sure I wasn't going to really push my body over the edge. And yeah, so that's what I did. Blood test came back, triglycerides well in range. Glucose was down around 70. Insulin, like I said, was down around 1. C-reactive protein was at 2. Cholesterol was through the roof. It was 274 or 294 or something like that, 284. I don't know, it was up higher than it normally would be. And I thought, that's good. What does cholesterol do? Repairs the body tissues. That's what it does. Goes in, it's repairing something. Inflammatory markers are down. Great. That means that's health occurring. You're getting healthier. You're not getting those autoimmune system issues anymore. So your inflammation drops.
Yep.
Insulin level drops. You're not sugar dependent, and you don't have metabolic issues at that point. It means your liver is functioning correctly. Okay. So there is a way out of this. Now, obviously, I'm not going to ask I might ask a couple people to try to go to this extreme to see if they get the same responses or not. I don't know if anybody's willing to do that or not. If somebody is, I would love to know that. And especially those who have real trouble. Like if, I've had patients who've had trouble, like I said, on ketogenic and they're doing intermittent fasting and they're still not dropping weight and stuff like that. There's another issue there, right? You have to kind of break that down further as what they're eating, how much, etc. Calories do make a difference. I hate to say that. I really hate to say that. So you have to handle the sugar overload issue. There's a restriction of eating, which we just discussed. And really, I don't know if I want to cover much else in this. I think that's basically it with that. So by doing that, you also can add something called choline. Eggs are very high in choline. Choline helps to break fat down or helps to basically get the liver functioning correctly. I believe, it helps transport fat out of the liver. That's what that actually does. So there is a way of handling diabetes, and I mean handling it, not just taking insulin, not just taking whatever. There is actually a way of handling it. Fully handling. There's ways of handling metabolic issues. There isn't a way of even handling cholesterol. But again, I don't worry too much about cholesterol. I'm worried about these other factors that are associated with inflammatory conditions in the body. And that's the real thing we're looking at. These are symptoms and signs that there's something not functioning when you say, okay, well, this person has a metabolic disorder. Their blood pressure is high, the cholesterol is high, the sugar levels are high. They have type 2 diabetes or they're moving into it. That's metabolic disorder. That tells you that that person's been having a problem for a very long time. That just didn't occur overnight. So it's not overnight that these get better.
Right.
Understand, when I was doing this last year, it's a year. It's about 9 months between the time I started it and by the time I did the last blood test in October. It's been a year. And, by the way, during that time period, I dropped 60 pounds, I believe. I think that's what I finally ended up losing, which was fat that I could not lose. I swear, I tried everything you could possibly think of during that time period to lose that weight. And I said, enough's enough. And, just knowing what I know and the level of discipline it takes to make those changes. Because you were talking about that when I walked in. You're like, it's really hard to, It's hard. It's almost impossible in this society. It's almost impossible. So your level of discipline has to be like through the roof. Because that day you sit down, you say, I'm not going to eat a candy bar today. And you walk into the dentist's office and there's, candy sitting there in the dentist's office. Think about that for a second. I've seen this. I had this one medical doctor. I went for flight physical. I'm a pilot, and you have to do a flight physical every 3 years or so. So I go in and have a physical done, and there's a big, huge jar, and it's got Milky Way bars and all sorts of stuff in the doctor's office. The doctor was, not okay. He was metabolically challenged, we'll say, put at least. I don't know how else to put that. He was metabolically challenged.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, yeah, this is what you're eating. I mean, this is 20 years ago when I was flying. And I'm like, dude.
What are you doing to your body?
What are you doing, man? And especially your patients. So anyway, it was one of those, one of those things you see, and it's funny, but that's what happens. You walk, like I was Saturday night. We ran an event at my church. And it was a fasting day for me, so I wasn't eating anything that day. And we go to this event, and there's this awesome artesian bread and baked beans, and I'm like, oh man, and then this apple pie that looked tremendous, like, you're thinking to yourself, man, I want that. And then there's that thing that kicks in the back of your head, you got enough discipline, man. You can't do it. You can't do it because you're not going to feel good. So Saturday I didn't eat at all. Sunday, I was really not planning on eating yesterday either, but I got a bit hungry, so I had a steak and some burgers and, a few other things, and I felt actually worse eating than I did before I ate. And so, these are the points I'm kind of making. You got to kind of figure it out for yourself, what you should and shouldn't do on that aspect, or how far you can go with it. I know I can go at least 2 days without eating consistently every 2 to 3 days. I can do that now without a problem. But I can't really go 3 days without eating. Body starts to fight, and there is that point where I actually will hit a fatigue point, meaning I'm working on a patient, and next thing I know, my body has no energy left. So all the glucose and glycogen that was in the muscles that were being used give out. But again, this is after working a day, doing a 2.5 hour workout twice before the body would have that response. That's a lot. So when I'm saying what I'm saying, this is really interesting, and maybe I'll write a paper on it someday. That's never going to happen, honestly. But it's interesting to see the response the body gets once it starts noticing that it's healthier. So with our programs, our nutrition response programs, or nutrition response testing programs, we're looking to get what is causing the disorders, what is causing the dysfunction, stripping that out, getting rid of those toxic particles, getting rid of all of that garbage in your system, in your liver particularly. Then we deal with the dietary end of it. Now, most of the time, like I said, most people don't have to do what I've done. I'm doing something extreme because I'm really testing the waters on this, because I've not heard anybody else ever do something like this. And most people don't have to go that far. All they have to do is change a little bit about what they're consuming, cut back on their sugar intake. And if you can get it down below 25 grams, you'll start to see that weight loss occur even faster than what you've already lost. 12 pounds in three weeks? You said, right? Yeah, that's incredible.
4 pounds a week, yeah.
Yeah. Tells you how much of it's inflammation too, because a lot of the fluid people retain in their bellies and stuff is actually inflammatory. That's why cortisol, they always talk about cortisol levels being high and your adrenals are high, so you get these bellies. It's not fat, it's actually fluid. So you get that fluid out, and the next thing you know, you're skinny, right? The GLP-1 injections that people are doing. You don't need to do that. You really don't. because it reduces your diet. I mean, it reduces your willingness to eat. You know, what you want to eat, your appetite. It reduces your appetite is what it does. Okay. Don't eat for 2 or 3 days. And believe it or not, by the second day, you don't want to eat.
But the problem is too, when you get off of that, you're gonna go right back to your old habits if you don't change your.
Yeah, it is a habitary thing. Yeah, you have to have your habits.
The pill and shot or whatever they're doing, it's just temporary.
Yeah,
Makes you feel good for now, but if you don't change your
Yeah,
ways.
we've had patients go on that. They'll lose 20, 50 pounds.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, they're up 50 pounds. Like they're back to where they started before they did the
Or
medication.
a lot of side effects.
Yeah, and you don't
Yes.
really, right, and they still don't know all the side effects with
Yeah.
it. And that's the aspect that concerns me. Because any drug, even a hormone drug, is going to have some side effects.
And like you said with the
You know.
the media and there's money in diabetes.
A lot of
There's
money.
money in
Yep.
weight loss now too.
Oh yeah, tons of money in weight loss.
They encourage, or it's okay to be a big fat lady. No, it's not.
Well, they've been pushing that a lot because a lot of people are getting uncomfortable, and I've talked to a lot of patients who got to the point, the level of frustration, like I was even at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
I was at the stage, the level of frustration with trying to lose like 10 or 15 pounds. It's like, what do you have to do this? Because my diet was perfect for years. Wasn't losing an ounce.
Yeah.
So no, there's something else. There's something else going on, and I think it has a lot to do with how we eat, not just what we eat.
Mm-hmm.
The intermittent fasting thing has become like one of those big hits. Even the carnivore diet, which is basically what I was doing, it's really called the lion diet, which is, like I said, just red meat and salt, and it's very rare people do that. You got maybe 1 million people on the planet doing that kind of diet right now. Most people can't afford the meat, really, is what it comes down to. But that was the other thing too, affordability for this.
Right.
Oh.
That's what I was thinking with the red meat.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's costing me under $100 a week to eat.
Oh my gosh. No.
That's nothing nowadays. You go to Costco or Sam's or BJ's or one of those stores, and you go in and you spend $400 a week on God knows what. $100 a week. I was eating 3 steaks, so that added up to around $45, $50.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would have packets of chopped meat, or I got them from Sam's, and it's probably not the best meat because it's not grass fed, but whatever. Prime rib burgers.
Oh.
That's what I was eating. Rib eyes, other types of steak, prime rib burgers, and liver at least once every couple weeks.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I ate.
I'm not a liver
So
person.
literally $50, maybe $60 on the steaks, and then another $20 on. I mean, we're talking $80, maybe $100 a week. It was under $100 a week. You go out to dinner, you're spending $100.
Easy.
You get a pizza and wings, you're spending $50.
Oh,
So $100. So that's what I mean. You think it's expensive, but it's really not. It's the
That's
opposite.
what I'm finding with a lot of stuff that I'm buying now, because I told Doctor that I was reading more labels than I've ever read in my life, I swear.
You have to now.
But I'm spending more on the other stuff, but I'm not buying the crap.
Hmm?
So it's
Yeah.
like, now once I get going and more changing of my old habits, it's probably going to work out okay.
Oh yeah, you'll be fine.
But it's tough, it's tough to change your habits. That's all
It is, and that's right. That's the hardest thing you have is actually
I think
changing your habits.
people nowadays spend more money on junk food
That's
than red meat.
Yeah, exactly.
They can easily spend
Yeah.
$100, $200 on junk food. And if they would just turn it around and spend it in the meat.
And all the drinks and everything, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, anyway, so that's all I have. Do you guys have any other questions for me?
No,
Nothing?
I think of- no.
Okay, good. Then that's it. Then we'll end off here. And those of you who are online, if you want to give us a call at some point, you're welcome to do so.